Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Demi Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hello friends, welcome back to Literary Blend. Today's chapter is Mood Boards, Agent Guides, and Editor Guides. And joining me on the show to chat all about this is Aaliyah Paolucci. Hello Aaliyah.
Hi, it's
How are
so great to
you?
be here.
No, I'm so
I'm
excited to
doing
have
well.
you. Oh, I'm so excited to have you. Hope you're doing well. I'm doing well too. This is going to be so much fun. Before we dive into this chapter of the show, I would love for you to share a little about yourself and your journey in publishing so far.
So I am a newly agented author. I primarily write fantasy and romance for young adult and new adult audiences. I just have a book on sub, and I've only been on sub now for about a little while, so everything's still new in the publishing journey for me so far.
Yeah, well, congrats on being on sub. That's a huge step. And I hope you get a book deal soon.
That's the dream.
Yes, for all of us. So let's chat about mood boards, agent guides, and editor guides. And I know you make these a ton for yourself and other authors. And I've been wanting to do a chapter on this for a while, and I thought you would be a perfect guest for this one. So just to give the listeners who have no idea what any of this is a little glimpse into what these things are before we dive into the specifics, and to give a little glimpse into what mood boards are and agent and editor guides.
Sure. So, mood boards are essentially a compilation of about 6 to 9 images typically that convey elements and themes that you can find in your manuscript. They're usually laid out in a kind of board sense where all of the images will either border a quote or a central image. And it's all to really give off the aesthetic and the vibes of the story that you're working on and trying to pitch to publishing professionals. And agent guides and editor guides are essentially query letters, but with a more design element to them. So they'll feature the title of your work, the comps of your work, tropes and themes that you have, all while giving it this sort of elegant design that showcases how your story feels. And it gives agents and editors a little glimpse into your manuscript so when they look at them they can be like, "Oh, well that interests me. I'll ask this writer to query them or have their agents send me their work."
Perfect. Great introduction to mood boards and agent and editor guides. So let's chat more about mood boards. I love how you said it's basically to capture the aesthetic of your book with 6 to 9 images, which with a central quote or image or something like that. So where do you start? So when you're writing, or so when you're making your own, or when you're making one for another author, what's the starting point to begin to get a list of the kinds of images that you think you might want to include in the mood board?
For me, it's all about pulling elements from the manuscript that make them unique. So, for example, my novel, The Dragon Prodigy, that I make mood boards for, I think of, okay, what elements specifically do I want people to see that really shows off the personality of this manuscript? So, in that instance, I'll take dragons and I'll take combat boots and daggers and leather uniforms, and I'll try to put them up on a board in a way that feels cohesive so that all of the images blend together perfectly in order to convey that sense of story.
I love that. And I love how you mentioned as well thinking about what makes your story unique. And I think that's where they can really stand out. Because if you have too many generic images that don't really capture the essence and personality of your story, it might not be as compelling. But all of our manuscripts have unique elements to them, imagery, maybe certain symbols that come up in the story, certain colors that are meaningful in the world or the story. And so I love the idea of really thinking thinking about the manuscript and asking yourself, what imagery and symbols and things in my book set it apart, and then using those as the foundation of the mood board.
It's really all about conveying what your story is in just one image. Because usually when we're posting mood boards, it's during pitch events. And pitch events online can be really saturated. We see numerous pitches, sometimes one writer pitches 4 manuscripts in one event. So when you have an agent or an editor who's scrolling through and they're looking at all these posts and trying to figure out which ones they want to read, having a mood board that's bold and cohesive and has a well thought out design can really lure in their attention and draw their eyes to your pitch specifically so they can look at that and decide whether they want to see your work or not.
Yeah, no, that's great. And pitch events, I'm happy you brought those up because that's definitely where these are popular. And authors obviously post them and the agent guides and editor guides too whenever they want to, but they're definitely popular in the pitch events. And you have a really great point in that they can be very oversaturated. And so if an agent is scrolling or an editor is scrolling and they see this, this might be what compels them to actually read your pitch. They're going to see the mood board before they even read the pitch. And so I really love the idea of making it eye-catching and engaging to make them stop scrolling and take a look at your pitch.
And when it comes to those agent and editor guides too, it's so important to really show off what your manuscript has to offer. That's including the themes and tropes of your book, but also incorporating some snippets or maybe even the opening lines and maybe having just a small elevator pitch in there. But sometimes you can just pick and pull things from your own query letter and insert it in there too. And really lure in agents and editors and be like, this is what I have to offer, so if you're scrolling through, you can definitely check this out. It's ready for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a perfect transition into chatting a little more about the agent and editor guides. So, for these authors, post more than one image that kind of captures the entire guide. So, I know there are different approaches, but in general, when you look at the each component of a guide like this, what would you recommend for the separate images and what they typically include?
So, unlike mood boards for agent and editor guides, you want to keep things pretty simple and not have everything be overcrowded. You want to make sure that your title stands out, any font that you have really stands out with the design. The images can mostly be on like the borders and the perimeters of each square, just to make sure you're balancing like text to images to design to really make sure that you can read everything and everything just flows together nicely. It's all about perfecting that composition.
Perfect. So now I want to hear more about choosing different kinds of colors and just overall vibes visually with like the colors. Not necessarily like the kinds of images, but choosing what colors to use maybe for like a background or text, what kind of suggestions you have, both tying into fitting the vibes of the manuscript, but also contrast and readability.
For me personally, I'm really big into color symbolism. So all of my projects have their own colors. You'll often see that the Dragon Prodigy usually uses monotone purples. So I'll go from dark purple to lavender and things like that. I typically ask my clients what kind of color palette really suits their work best. And in terms of fonts, if it really depends on the genre for me when I'm designing. So if somebody has a more literary piece, I tend to use cursive fonts. And if somebody brings me a fantasy, I try to find ones that are a little bit more gothic, a little bit more whimsical. I typically, when I'm designing them to make sure there's readability, I like to make the titles of each page really bold, definitely a stronger font than the paragraphs. And for the paragraphs, I always try to make them lighter and more saturated than the background so they really stand out. So if you have a super deep background with a lot of dark colors, you're going to want to use a lighter text just to make sure that everything stands out. And if you have a lighter background, you can use darker colors for your font.
Perfect. So now let's chat about dimensions. So when authors are posting mood boards, agent guides, and editor guides on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram, are there certain dimensions for those images you would recommend for them to be displayed as best as possible on those platforms?
Of course. So the two shapes that I offer are 1600 by 900 pixels, which is more of a rectangle, and the 600 by 600, which is typically what you'll see in an Instagram post. It's the square. So for mood boards, I like to do the square. And for the agent and editor guides, I more so recommend the 1600 by 900 because when you upload them to X, they will try to compress a little bit to make sure all the images fit together nicely. So if you do a 1600 by 900 pixel setup, it'll shrink your images, but it will make sure all four of your images of your guide are able to be seen just from right off the bat. Because if you do a square and you put all four squares in there for your guide, then that means they're going to try to make them bigger. So you'll have to individually click on those images to see the whole image.
A lot of great information. Perfect. So now let's shift into actually finding images. So people might be listening like, oh, this is super cool. I want to make a mood board or I want to make an agent guide, but where in the world do I, number one, even start to look for images? So let's start there. Where can people find images? And then we'll get into the whole copyright thing and AI thing and stuff like that. But where can people typically start to look for images?
So typically, you can look for images on Google, Pinterest, Pixabay, or even Adobe Stock. I tend to find a lot of my images through Adobe Stock and through Pinterest. I tend to find images that I know are free to use and ones that aren't necessarily art created by somebody else. Like if it has a little signature on it, I don't take that because I know that's another artist's work. I tend to just pick up like photographs that I find, or if I see some kind of historical painting, I'll use screenshots of those.
Perfect. So you definitely brought up the point of if something is someone else's artwork, they own that, they have the copyright to that, and you definitely don't want to get into any situations of using images that have copyright tied to them because you can get in trouble by photographers, artists. So aside from looking for like signatures or watermarks, what are some other tips and tricks you have for authors to know if this is safe to use or it can be something that can get them into trouble with copyright?
Sure. So usually if you're on a certain website like Pixabay or Adobe Stock, they'll have like little labels to let you know if something was created by AI, or they'll have labels to know that you're allowed to use it however you want to. If you're looking up images on Google, I know there's a tool that you can use. It's a search filter, and what that does, it'll only pull up images that are free to use and don't have any copyrights attached to them.
Perfect. So now let's chat about AI. So, as authors, I don't know about you, but I do not support AI, and that goes to the whole art aspect too, because I'm a songwriter, I have a graphic designer, all my stuff is made, and I definitely want to respect the creations of all artists and allow them to continue to make their work. So, like you said, there might be some kind of indicator letting you know that it was created by AI. Other times it can be harder to tell. So, for authors who definitely do not want to include AI images in mood boards and agent or editor guides, and they don't know for sure, what are some tips and tricks to help identify if an image was created by AI or not?
Of course. So if you're looking at an image and it's not necessarily telling you that something's AI, but maybe it just feels a little bit off. I know there are websites you can use where you can upload the image and it'll scan it to let you know if it is AI or not. Other times, I will just look at an image, and if I really can't tell if it's made by AI or not, I'll just try to find a new image that is similar to that one, but one that I'm more sure is made out of AI. And of course, I think it's okay if we make a mistake here or there because sometimes AI images are really hard to differentiate from actual images. So if you accidentally use one in a mood board or a guide, I don't think that's a problem. I think it's more so an issue of if you generate a full thing specifically with AI because it's just something that I don't support. I know others may feel differently, but that's just my personal thing.
No, I completely agree with you. I completely agree. Like, mistakes happen. We're not perfect. We're human. And so if you accidentally use an image made from AI, that's completely different than asking AI to generate one of these for you. Because you can use fabulous people like Aaliyah to make you one. Oh my goodness. So just to kind of wrap up here, what are some final thoughts you would like to share about mood boards, agent guides, and editor guides?
Just really, honestly, just have fun with the designs. I see people sometimes say, like, oh, I want to make one, but I don't really know how to use the tools, or I don't have the money to pay for Photoshop. You can find free services in Canva, and I'm sure there are plenty of other free design apps you could use. It's all just about playing around with different elements, with different colors, with different fonts, and just having a good time. I mean, I don't think there's going to be no such thing as the perfect mood board or the perfect guide. So really just do your best and have fun with it.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect note to end on because, like our manuscripts and like all kinds of art, this is a form of art too. You're taking different images and things like that, maybe centering a quote from your manuscript surrounded by these images, and there's a lot of different creative approaches you can take. And because it's something creative, it's not going to be perfect. And so I completely love that point of having fun with it. There's no right or wrong way to make a mood board. It's all about the vibes and capturing your story in the best way you feel reflects your manuscript. And so having fun with it is definitely number one.
For sure.
Perfect. So this has been so much fun. And now we have made it to your plot twist. Are you ready?
Oh boy, I am.
So, speaking of the dragon prodigy, if you could choose three colors that perfectly represent things in your manuscript, what would those three colors be and what do they symbolize?
That's a good one. I think I would have to go with a dark purple, a dark blue, and maybe a white. So the dark purples for me are for the royal aspect and the high military ranking that can be found in my novel. Since each military ranking is symbolized by a different color, the top elites are dark purple. The dark blue symbolizes the kingdom to which the setting of the book takes place. And the white is for my female main character's Lily's dragon.
Love it so much. Perfect. Well, it was such a delight having you on the show. Can you please share with everybody where they can connect with you online and check out all the work you do if they would like to use you to make a mood board agent guide or editor guide?
You can find me at Aaliyah Paolucci on Instagram and at AL Paolucci on X. You can always send me a DM if you're interested in purchasing a mood board or a agent guide from me.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners, that is a wrap on this chat with Aaliyah, all about mood boards, agent guides, and editor guides. If you enjoyed our conversation, please consider leaving Literary Blend a review and giving it 5 stars to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in publishing you think would enjoy the show too, please pass it along to them. Thanks for listening, and until we flip to the next chapter, happy reading and writing.